The ropes sliced into Rebecca Nelson's wrists as she dangled from the wooden bridge, her body swinging precariously over the rushing waters of the Sweetwater River. She couldn't scream with the gag tight around her mouth, and tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face as her fingers grew numb from the bindings. The men who had left her there, former associates of her late father, had ridden off laughing, confident that this daughter of a supposed cheat would soon be nothing but a memory swept away by the merciless current below. Wyoming Territory, 1876. The land was as unforgiving as the people who sought to tame it. Rebecca's arms burned with agony as she twisted in the wind, her honey-colored hair whipping around her face. She had been traveling west to start anew after her father's death had left her with nothing but debts and whispers about stolen gold. The stagecoach had been ambushed just outside of Promise Creek, and while the other passengers had been robbed and left behind, she had been singled out. Nelson's daughter, they had called her, as if the name itself was a crime. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw a figure on horseback approaching the bridge. Hope and fear warred within her chest, another bandit coming to finish what the others had started, or perhaps salvation. The rider dismounted, and a tall man in a worn leather duster appeared at the edge of the bridge. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the concern etched across his features as he dropped to his knees and peered over the edge. "Hold on, miss," he called, his voice deep and steady. "I'm coming down." Without hesitation, he secured a rope to one of the bridge posts and began lowering himself down the wooden supports, moving with the agility of someone who had spent a lifetime in the saddle and on the land. As he descended, Rebecca could see him more clearly: broad shoulders, strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. He reached her level, balancing on a narrow beam while holding onto his rope with one hand. "I've got you," he assured her, his voice gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "Name's Wade Irwin. I'm going to cut you loose, but I'll catch you, trust me." Rebecca's eyes widened with fear. If he cut her loose, what would prevent her from plunging into the churning waters below? But there was something in his steady gaze that compelled her to believe him. With remarkable precision, Wade used a hunting knife to slice through the ropes that bound her to the bridge. As the last fibers gave way, he caught her around the waist with his free arm, her weight causing him to grunt with exertion. For a heart-stopping moment, they both swayed dangerously, the rope creaking ominously. "Put your arms around my neck," he instructed, and Rebecca complied, her limbs weak and trembling. With a strength that seemed almost superhuman, he hoisted her onto his shoulder in a fireman's carry, securing her with one powerful arm while using the other to begin the climb back up. Each movement was calculated, each breath measured as Wade ascended the support beams. Rebecca could feel the steady beating of his heart against her side, a reassuring rhythm amid the chaos of her own frantic pulse. The wind buffeted them, and once Wade's boots slipped, sending a shower of dust and splinters into the river below, but he recovered without missing a beat. When they finally reached the top, Wade pulled them both onto the solid planks of the bridge, setting Rebecca down gently before cutting the bindings at her wrists and removing the gag from her mouth. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice raw. They would have left me to die." Wade's expression darkened as he examined the angry red marks on her wrists. "Who did this to you, miss?" "Men who blamed my father for stealing gold they claimed was theirs," Rebecca explained, wincing as she tried to stand. Her legs gave way immediately, and Wade caught her before she could fall. "Easy there," he cautioned, supporting her weight effortlessly. "Those men, did you catch their names?" Rebecca shook her head. "Only that their leader was called Jed. They ambushed the stagecoach I was on, heading to Promise Creek." Wade's jaw tightened. "Jed Harmon and his gang. They've been terrorizing this area for months." He glanced at his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion waiting patiently nearby. "I'm heading to Promise Creek myself. I can take you there, get you to a doctor." Rebecca hesitated, years of caution making her wary of accepting help from a stranger, even one who had just saved her life. "Why would you do that?" A hint of a smile tugged at Wade's lips. "Because it's the right thing to do, miss. Nelson, Rebecca Nelson." She straightened her shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity despite her disheveled appearance. "And I'd be grateful for your assistance, Mr. Irwin." Wade helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, his arms creating a protective cage around her as he took the reins. "Hold on, Miss Nelson. It's about an hour's ride to town." As they set off, Rebecca found herself leaning back against his solid chest, exhaustion and delayed shock making her light-headed. The rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them and the security of Wade's presence lulled her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. "Stay with me," Wade's voice rumbled near her ear. "Talk to me. Tell me what brings a lady like yourself to this untamed territory." Rebecca forced her eyes open, focusing on the landscape passing by. "I inherited nothing but debts when my father died 3 months ago. I sold everything to pay what I could, but it wasn't enough. There were rumors, accusations that he had stolen gold from a mining venture. I didn't believe it, but others did." She swallowed hard. "I have an aunt in California who offered me a place to stay, but I need to work first, save some money. I heard Promise Creek was growing, that they needed teachers." "You're a teacher." There was respect in Wade's voice. "I was in St. Louis. I taught at a girls' school." A pang of homesickness hit her. "It seems a lifetime ago now." "Promise Creek could use a teacher," Wade confirmed. "Town's growing fast, lot of families settling there since the railroad came through last year." They crested a hill, and in the distance, Rebecca could see a collection of buildings nestled in a valley. Promise Creek. The afternoon sun bathed the town in golden light, making it appear almost welcoming. "What about you, Mr. Irwin?" she asked, finding strength returning to her voice. "What's your business in Promise Creek?" There was a pause before he answered. "I ranch about 10 miles outside of town, got a decent spread, raise cattle, was bringing in supplies when I spotted trouble on the bridge." Rebecca turned slightly to look at his face. "Then I'm doubly grateful. You went out of your way to save a stranger." Those storm-blue eyes met hers for a moment. "Never could ride past someone in need, Miss Nelson." As they approached the outskirts of Promise Creek, Rebecca became acutely aware of her appearance, dress torn and dirty, hair tangled, face streaked with tears and dust. "I must look a fright," she murmured, attempting to smooth her hair. "You look like someone who survived," Wade replied simply. The main street of Promise Creek was bustling with activity wagons loaded with goods, cowboys on horseback, women in calico dresses, and children darting between buildings. As Wade guided his horse toward a 2-story building with a sign reading Dr. Samuel Fleming, physician, curious glances were cast in their direction. Wade dismounted first, then reached up to help Rebecca down. Her legs still felt wobbly, and she clutched his arms for support as he steadied her. "Wade Irwin," a booming voice called out. A portly man with a silver mustache approached them, concern evident on his face. "What's happened here?" "Sheriff Tanner," Wade acknowledged with a nod. "This is Miss Rebecca Nelson. She was attacked by Jed Harmon's gang, left hanging from Sweetwater Bridge." The sheriff's bushy eyebrows shot up in alarm. "Good Lord, are you all right, miss?" Before Rebecca could answer, the door to the doctor's office opened, and a slender man with spectacles appeared. "Bring her inside," he instructed after one assessing look. Wade kept a supportive arm around Rebecca's waist as they entered the doctor's office. The interior was clean and organized, with examining table, cabinets of supplies, and a desk covered in medical journals. "I'm Dr. Fleming," the physician introduced himself, pulling out a chair for Rebecca. "Let's have a look at those wrists." As the doctor examined her injuries, Sheriff Tanner questioned her about the attack. Rebecca recounted the ambush on the stagecoach, the men's accusations about her father, and how they had taken her to the bridge while letting the other passengers go. "Harmon's getting bolder," the sheriff muttered, making notes in a small book. "But this is personal. Did your father have dealings with Jed Harmon?" Rebecca shook her head. "Not that I know of. My father was a banker in St. Louis." The men mentioned something about a mining investment gone wrong, gold that disappeared. The sheriff and Wade exchanged glances. "The Blackwater mine scandal," Wade said quietly. 2 years ago, several investors lost everything when the mine's owner vanished with their money. But I never heard of a Nelson being involved. It was around that time that my father's health began to decline," Rebecca admitted. "He, Changed, became withdrawn, worried. I assumed it was business troubles, but he never spoke of any mining investments. Doctor. Fleming finished wrapping her wrists in clean bandages. You're fortunate, Miss Nelson. No broken bones, though you'll be sore for days. I'm more concerned about shock and exposure. You need rest, good food, and a safe place to stay. This presented a problem Rebecca hadn't considered. Her meager savings were in her trunk on the stagecoach, along with all her possessions. The stagecoach, my belongings. I'll send deputies to recover what they can, Sheriff Tanner assured her. In the meantime, Mrs. Tanner runs the boarding house across the street. She'll have a room for you. I can't pay, Rebecca said, embarrassment heating her cheeks. Not until I retrieve my things or find work. Don't worry about that now, the sheriff said kindly. Wade, who had been silent during the examination, spoke up. I'll cover Miss Nelson's expenses until she's on her feet. Rebecca turned to him in surprise. Mr. Irwin, I couldn't possibly consider it a loan, he said firmly. You can repay me once you're settled. Dr. Fleming helped Rebecca to her feet. A hot bath, a good meal, and a night's rest will do wonders. Come back tomorrow so I can check those wrists. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. Wade escorted Rebecca across the street to a well-maintained two-story house with a sign reading Tanner House Boarding. A stout woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair opened the door before they could knock. Jasper sent word, she explained, ushering them inside. I'm Martha Tanner. You poor dear, what an ordeal. I've already started heating water for a bath, and there's stew on the stove. Rebecca was overwhelmed by the woman's immediate kindness. Thank you, Mrs. Tanner. I don't know how to repay such generosity. Nonsense. Any decent person would do the same. Mrs. Tanner cast an appraising look at Wade. And you, Mr. Irwin, will you be staying for supper? Wade glanced at Rebecca, then shook his head. Thank you, madam, but I should get back to my ranch before dark. I'll return tomorrow to check on Miss Nelson. As he turned to leave, Rebecca caught his arm. Mr. Irwin Wade, I don't have the words to thank you properly. You saved my life today. Something flickered in his eyes, warmth perhaps, or understanding. Get some rest, Rebecca. You're safe now. After he left, Mrs. Tanner led Rebecca upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. The bathroom's at the end of the hall. I'll bring up some clean clothes. My niece left some things when she visited last month. Should be about your size. Left alone, Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up to her. She had nearly died. Would have died, if not for the cowboy who had appeared like an answer to prayers. She hadn't even had time to speak. Wade Irwin. His face swam in her memory strong, weathered by sun and wind, but with kindness in those remarkable blue eyes. He had risked his own life to save hers, a complete stranger. Such men were rare in her experience. As she soaked in the hot bath later, washing away the dirt and fear of the day, Rebecca wondered about the path that had led her here, to this town with its unfamiliar faces and open skies. Perhaps Promise Creek would indeed offer what its name suggested, a promise of something better, a fresh start. And perhaps the cowboy who had lifted her from certain death might be part of that new beginning. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the curtains of Rebecca's room at the boarding house. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings, but then the memories of the previous day came rushing back: the attack, Dangling from the bridge, and Wade Irwin's rescue. She sat up gingerly, wincing at the stiffness in her shoulders and arms. The bandages on her wrists were stark white against her skin, covering the rope burns that served as evidence of her ordeal. Moving carefully, she washed and dressed in the clothes. Mrs. Tanner had provided a simple blue calico dress that was a bit short at the ankles but otherwise fit well enough. Downstairs, the boarding house's dining room was filled with the aroma of coffee, bacon, and freshly baked bread. 3 men, obviously regular boarders, were already seated at the long table, and they stood politely when Rebecca entered. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Tanner greeted her warmly. "You're looking much better. Come, sit and have some breakfast." Rebecca accepted a cup of coffee gratefully. "Has there been any word about the stagecoach, my belongings?" Sheriff rode out at first light with 2 deputies. One of the boarders, an older man with a neatly trimmed white beard, informed her. "I'm Theodore Grant, by the way, town banker. These are Mr. Peterson and Mr. Collins, both work for the railroad." Rebecca nodded to each man in turn. "Rebecca Nelson, I appreciate the information, Mr. Grant. Terrible business, what happened to you," Mr. Peterson commented, shaking his head. "Harmon's gang is getting out of hand." "But you were lucky Wade Irwin happened along." "You know Mr. Irwin well?" Rebecca asked, trying to sound merely conversational as she buttered a slice of bread. The men exchanged glances. "Everyone knows Wade," Mr. Collins said. "One of the most successful ranchers in the territory. Built the Flying W up from nothing after the war. Keeps to himself mostly," Mr. Grant added, "but he's a good man. Fair in business, generous when the town needs help. Lost his wife and child to fever about 5 years back. Hasn't been the same since, they say." Rebecca's heart constricted at this revelation. The loss explained something she had sensed in Wade, an underlying sadness beneath his calm exterior. "He was here at dawn," Mrs. Tanner mentioned as she refilled coffee cups. "Brought these for you." She gestured to a package on the sideboard. Curious, Rebecca unwrapped the brown paper to find several items inside a hairbrush and comb, a small bottle of rose-scented toilet water, a pair of gloves, and most surprisingly, a book. Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. "He asked what you might need, and I suggested a few things," Mrs. Tanner explained. "The book was his idea, said a teacher might appreciate something to read while recovering." Rebecca ran her fingers over the book's leather cover, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. It was an unexpectedly personal gift from a man she barely knew. After breakfast, Rebecca walked to Dr. Fleming's office for her promised check-up. The doctor pronounced her healing well and rewrapped her wrists with fresh bandages. "Another few days and you'll be good as new," he assured her. "Though I'd recommend avoiding any more dangles from bridges." His attempt at humor made Rebecca smile despite herself. "I'll certainly try, doctor." As she was leaving, Sheriff Tanner arrived, carrying a familiar trunk. "Found your belongings, Miss Nelson." Stagecoach was still there, though the horses were gone. "Looks like the bandits didn't bother with passengers' luggage after they took the mail and strongbox." Relief flooded through Rebecca. "Thank you, Sheriff. This is everything I own in the world." Together, they carried the trunk back to the boarding house, where Mrs. Tanner helped Rebecca unpack and press her wrinkled clothes. It was while organizing her modest possessions that Rebecca came across her father's pocket watch and a small leather journal she hadn't known existed. Curiously, she opened the journal to find entries in her father's familiar handwriting, dating back 3 years. Most were mundane notations about banking matters and daily life, but as she flipped through the pages, certain entries caught her attention. Meeting with D. Again about Blackwater investment. "Too good to pass up," he says. "Using bank funds temporary measure only, will replace before audit." Rebecca's blood ran cold. Had her father actually embezzled from his own bank? She read on, tracking increasingly desperate entries as the temporary measure became a mounting crisis. D. Disappeared. Mine worthless. Gold was lie. Others invested too. Harmon threatening exposure if don't pay back double. Impossible situation. The final entries, dated just weeks before her father's death, revealed a man consumed by guilt and fear. Heart failing. Doctors say months at most, cannot face consequences. Rebecca must never know. Better she think me honorable, even in death. Tears blurred Rebecca's vision as she closed the journal. Her father had been involved in the scandal after all, had possibly even helped convince others to invest based on false promises. The men who had attacked her, they believed she knew something about the missing gold, or perhaps they simply wanted revenge on Edward Nelson's daughter. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Tanner poked her head in. "Wade Irwin's downstairs asking after you. Shall I send him up?" Hastily wiping her eyes, Rebecca tucked the journal away. "No, thank you. I'll come down." Wade stood in the boarding house parlor, hat in hand, his tall frame making the room seem smaller. He had shaved and changed into clean-clothes dark trousers, a blue shirt that matched his eyes, and a leather vest. When he saw Rebecca, something in his expression softened. "Miss Nelson, You're looking better today." "Thanks to you," she replied, suddenly conscious of her borrowed dress and still damp hair. "Thank you for the gifts, they were very thoughtful." A hint of color touched his tan cheeks. "Mrs. Tanner deserves the credit for most of it." "I just recalled you mentioning you were a teacher, thought you might enjoy the book." "I love Jane Austen," Rebecca admitted, "though I'm surprised to find a copy in Wyoming Territory, my late wife's," Wade explained, a shadow crossing his face. "She brought a small library with her from Boston. Said she couldn't bear the thought of life without books." An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite knowing how to navigate the mention of his loss. "I was heading to the mercantile," Wade finally said. "Thought you might want to come along, pick up anything you need. My treat." Rebecca hesitated. "You've already done so much, I can't keep accepting charity." "Not charity," Wade countered. "Call it Western hospitality. Besides, I heard Sheriff Tanner recovered your trunk. Once you're settled, you can repay any debts." His practical approach made it easier to accept. "In that case, I would appreciate the chance to get a few necessities." They walked side by side down Promise Creek's Main Street, drawing curious glances from townspeople. Rebecca was acutely aware of Wade's presence beside her, his unhurried stride matching hers, the respectful distance he maintained, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings as if watching for threats. "People are staring," she murmured. Wade's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Small town, new face, and word travels fast about what happened at the bridge." "And about who rescued me," Rebecca added. "Mr. Grant mentioned you're quite well known around here." "Been in the area a long time," Wade said simply. "Built my ranch after the war, people remember." "They also mentioned you lost your wife and child," Rebecca said softly, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I'm sorry, that was presumptuous of me." Wade was quiet for several steps. "Elizabeth and our son Thomas, fever swept through 5 years ago, took them both within days of each other." "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said, her heart aching for his loss. "Life out here is beautiful but harsh," Wade replied, his voice steady despite the pain that must lie beneath his words. "You learn to keep going or you don't survive." They reached the mercantile, a large establishment with a wide porch and windows displaying everything from farm implements to ladies' hats. Inside, the store was a treasure trove of goods, with barrels of dried beans and flour, shelves of canned foods, racks of clothing, and glass cases displaying more expensive items. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, greeted Wade warmly. "Mr. Irwin, good to see you." "And this must be Miss Nelson. I'm Oliver Reed. My wife and I run the store." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Reed," Rebecca replied. "Miss Nelson needs to outfit herself after yesterday's trouble," Wade explained. "Put whatever she chooses on my account." Despite her protests, Wade insisted she select everything she might need: toiletries, a shawl for cooler evenings, stationery for writing to her aunt, and other small necessities. As they browsed, a woman with a young daughter entered the store, and the little girl immediately ran to Wade. "Mr. Wade," she cried, throwing her arms around his legs. Wade's entire demeanor transformed as he crouched down to the child's level. "Miss Lily Cooper, you've grown at least 3 inches since I saw you last," the girl giggled. "Only 1 inch, Mama measured." "Still impressive," Wade said solemnly, then stood to greet the mother. "Mrs. Cooper, good to see you." "You too, Wade," the woman replied warmly. "And this is Rebecca Nelson," Wade introduced her, "new to Promise Creek. Miss Nelson, this is Sarah Cooper and her daughter Lily. Sarah teaches piano to half the children in town." Rebecca smiled at the pair. "It's lovely to meet you both." "Miss Nelson is a teacher," Wade added. "From St. Louis," Sarah's eyes lit up. "A teacher? Oh, that's wonderful news. We've been hoping the town council would hire someone. Our children have had such sporadic schooling since Miss Winters left to get married last fall." "I haven't actually secured a position yet," Rebecca clarified. "I only arrived yesterday and under rather unusual circumstances." "Yes, we heard," Sarah said sympathetically. "Dreadful business. But if you're planning to stay, I'm sure the council would be interested in speaking with you." Lily tugged at Rebecca's skirt. "Would you be our teacher? I want to learn about faraway places and big words." Rebecca couldn't help but laugh at the child's earnestness. I would be delighted to teach you about faraway places and big words if the opportunity arises. After the Coopers moved on to do their shopping, Wade observed, "Sounds like you might find work sooner than expected." "It would be a blessing," Rebecca admitted. "I need to support myself, and teaching is what I know." As they left the mercantile with their purchases, Wade pointed out other landmarks in town: the small church, the newspaper office, the town hall where the council met. It was a growing community, clearly prospering from the railroad connection and the surrounding ranches and farms. "Would you like to see more of the area?" Wade asked suddenly. "I could saddle a gentle mare for you at the livery, take you on a short ride." The view from Settler's Ridge shows the whole valley. The invitation was unexpected but appealing. After being confined indoors all morning, the thought of open air and space was irresistible. "I'd like that very much, if you're sure it's not an imposition." "No imposition," Wade assured her. "Been meaning to check on some grazing land that way anyhow." At the livery stable, Wade selected a dappled gray mare with a calm disposition for Rebecca. The stableman provided a side saddle, and Wade helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Despite her years in the city, Rebecca had grown up riding in the countryside outside St. Louis, and she settled into the saddle with familiar ease. Wade looked pleased as he swung up onto his own chestnut stallion. "You ride well." "My father taught me as a girl," Rebecca explained, then felt a pang at the mention of her father, the journal entries still fresh in her mind. They rode at a leisurely pace out of town, following a well-worn trail that wound through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers. The June day was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, and a sky so vast and blue it seemed infinite. After the terror of the bridge and the confines of recovery, the freedom of the open country was exhilarating. "It's beautiful," Rebecca breathed, taking in the panoramic landscape. "Different from St. Louis, I imagine," Wade commented. "Completely. There, everything is built, contained. Here, it's endless." She spread her arms wide, encompassing the horizon. "I can see why people are drawn to it, despite the dangers," Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's it exactly. The land demands respect, even fear sometimes, but it gives something back that's hard to find elsewhere." "Freedom," Rebecca suggested. "And possibility," Wade added. "Out here, a person can remake themselves, start fresh. The past matters less than what you build now." His words resonated with Rebecca's own hopes for a new beginning, away from the shadow of her father's mistakes. But did the past ever truly release its hold? The men who had left her dangling from that bridge certainly didn't think so. They climbed a gentle slope to Settler's Ridge, a high point overlooking the valley where Promise Creek nestled beside its namesake waterway. In the distance, mountains rose in purple majesty, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer season. Wade dismounted and helped Rebecca down from her horse. They stood side by side at the ridge's edge, taking in the breathtaking vista. "My ranch is there," Wade pointed to the northwest, where a cluster of buildings was just visible near a bend in the creek. Flying W. Started with 20 acres and a dozen cattle. Now it's over 2,000 acres, 500 head. There was quiet pride in his voice, the satisfaction of a man who had built something substantial through his own efforts. "It must be rewarding," Rebecca said, "seeing the results of your labor spread out before you like this." Wade looked at her with newfound respect. "Most women would ask about the house, not the land." Rebecca smiled. "I grew up hearing my father talk about investments and returns. I learned to appreciate the value of creating something lasting." A comfortable silence fell between them as they gazed out at the landscape. Rebecca was acutely aware of Wade beside her, his tall, solid presence, somehow both reassuring and unsettling at the same time. There was an attraction there, unmistakable but unacknowledged, born perhaps of the intense circumstances of their meeting. "Tell me about your life in St. Louis," Wade said eventually. "What was it like teaching at a girls' school?" Rebecca described her former life, the regimented days, the bright students, the satisfactions and frustrations of education. Wade listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his own intelligence and curiosity. "And your family?" he asked. "Besides your father, do you have others?" Rebecca shook her head. My mother died when I was 16. No siblings. Just my aunt in California now, my mother's sister. We've never been close, but she offered a home when she heard about my father's debts. She hesitated, then admitted, I found my father's journal this morning. It seems the men who attacked me had reason to bear a grudge against the Nelson name. Wade's expression grew serious. The Blackwater mine, Rebecca nodded, the admission painful. He invested bank funds without authorization. When the mine proved worthless and the owner disappeared with the money, my father couldn't replace what he'd taken. There were others involved too, including someone named Harmon. Jed Harmon's brother, Daniel, was one of the major investors, Wade explained. Lost everything, including land that had been in his family for generations. Killed himself shortly after. Jed blamed everyone connected to the scheme. And now he blames me, Rebecca said bleakly. For what my father did. Wade's hand came to rest lightly on her shoulder. You aren't responsible for your father's actions. I know that logically, but I can't help feeling the weight of it. All those people who lost their savings, their hopes. She looked up at him, troubled. Does everyone in town know about my father's involvement? If they do, they haven't mentioned it, Wade replied honestly. The scandal touched many families. Most prefer not to speak of it now. Rebecca took a deep breath of the clean, sage-scented air. Perhaps Promise Creek is the right place for me after all, a chance to make amends in some small way, to do some good. Is that why you want to teach, to make amends? No, Rebecca said firmly. I want to teach because I believe in education, in opening minds to possibilities. But if my presence here can somehow balance the scales my father tipped. She shrugged. It feels right. Wade studied her face, his blue eyes intent. You're an unusual woman, Rebecca Nelson. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. Is that a compliment, Mr. Irwin? A smile tugged at his mouth. It is indeed, and if we're to be friends, I think you should call me Wade. Friends, Rebecca echoed, testing the word. It felt insufficient somehow, but it was a beginning. I'd like that, Wade. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, until Wade cleared his throat and gestured to their horses. We should head back, storm brewing over the mountains. Rebecca hadn't noticed the dark clouds gathering to the west, but now she saw them purple-black thunderheads advancing across the sky. Will it reach us? Likely. Summer storms move fast here. Wade helped her mount her horse again, his hands lingering at her waist a heartbeat longer than necessary. We'll make it back before the worst hits. They rode at a brisker pace, the horses sensing the change in the weather and eager to return to their stables. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. By the time they reached the outskirts of Promise Creek, fat droplets were beginning to fall. At the livery stable, Wade insisted on seeing Rebecca safely back to the boarding house despite the increasingly heavy rain. They arrived at the front porch just as the downpour began in earnest, both of them damp but laughing at their narrow escape. Thank you for today, Rebecca said, reluctant to end their time together. For the ride and for listening. Wade stood on the porch step below her, which brought their faces nearly level. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat and darkened the shoulders of his duster. My pleasure, he said, his voice low. For a moment it seemed he might say more, might even step closer, but instead he touched the brim of his hat in a gentlemanly gesture. I'll call on you tomorrow if that's agreeable. Very agreeable, Rebecca confirmed, a flutter of anticipation in her chest. As Wade walked back into the rainy street toward the livery where he'd left his horse, Rebecca found herself watching until he disappeared from view, pondering the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this place and this man. Inside, Mrs. Tanner took one look at Rebecca's flushed cheeks and knowing smile spread across her face. Had a nice ride with Mr. Irwin, did you? It was lovely, Rebecca admitted. He showed me the view from Settler's Ridge. Mrs. Tanner said, helping Rebecca remove her damp shawl. Wade Irwin doesn't typically offer scenic tours to newcomers. You must have made quite an impression. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm further. He's simply being kind after what happened. Wade's always kind, Mrs. Tanner agreed, but he's also been keeping to himself for years. It's good to see him taking an interest again. She patted Rebecca's hand. Now come have some tea and get warm. The town council's stopping by later seems word of your teaching experience has reached them already. That evening, Rebecca met with 3 members of the Promise Creek Town Council: Mr. Grant from the bank, Reverend Porter from the small church, and Mrs. Abernathy, a formidable widow who owned the town's only hotel. They questioned her about her education, teaching methods, and experience, clearly impressed with her credentials. "We've been making do with parent volunteers since Miss Winters left," Reverend Porter explained, "but with 15 school-age children now and more families arriving monthly, we need a proper teacher." "The schoolhouse is small but adequate," Mrs. Abernathy added, "built 3 years ago. Has a small living quarters attached for the teacher. The position pays $40 monthly," Mr. Grant informed her. "Not princely, but living costs are low here, and there are often gifts of food and supplies from grateful parents." Rebecca could hardly believe her good fortune. "I would be honored to accept the position if you're offering it." The council members exchanged pleased glances. "We'd like you to start as soon as possible," Reverend Porter said. "Perhaps next Monday. That would give you time to recover and prepare." "Monday would be perfect," Rebecca agreed, her mind already racing with plans and curriculum ideas. After the council members departed, Rebecca sat by the window in the boarding house parlor, watching the rain and marveling at how quickly her fortunes had changed. From dangling above a watery grave to securing employment and housing in just 2 days, it seemed almost miraculous. And at the center of this transformation was Wade Irwin, the cowboy who had climbed down to save her. She found herself eager for tomorrow and the chance to see him again, to share her good news. The storm continued through the night, and Rebecca fell asleep to the sound of rain on the roof, dreaming of blue eyes and strong hands that never let her fall. The next morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed the world clean. Rebecca awoke feeling more herself than she had since the attack. The soreness in her arms diminished and her spirits buoyed by the teaching position awaiting her. She dressed in one of her own dresses, retrieved from her trunk a dove-gray cotton with white piping that she had sewn herself. Her hair, honey blonde and naturally wavy, she arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she was pleased to see color had returned to her cheeks. After breakfast, Rebecca asked Mrs. Tanner about the schoolhouse's location, thinking she might walk by and see her future workplace. "End of Pine Street, near the creek," Mrs. Tanner directed her. "Can't miss it, white clapboard with a bell tower. Keys are with Reverend Porter if you want to look inside." Rebecca was about to set out when there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Tanner answered it, and Rebecca heard Wade's deep voice in the entryway. Her heart gave an involuntary leap at the sound. "Good morning," Wade greeted her as he entered the parlor, hat in hand. He was dressed more formally today in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. "You're looking well." "I'm feeling much better," Rebecca confirmed. "And I have wonderful news. The town council has offered me the teaching position. I start on Monday." Genuine pleasure lit Wade's face. "That's excellent news. I knew they'd snap you up once they heard you were available." "Did you perhaps mention me to them?" Rebecca asked suspiciously. Wade's expression turned innocent. "I might have mentioned to Reverend Porter that a qualified teacher had arrived in town. The rest was your doing." Rebecca laughed, not entirely believing him but touched by his support nonetheless. "Well, I was just about to walk over and see the schoolhouse. Would you care to join me?" "That's why I'm here," Wade said. "Thought you might want to see the town properly now that you're feeling stronger." They strolled through Promise Creek together, Wade pointing out businesses and introducing Rebecca to people they encountered. The town was larger than she had initially realized, with several side streets branching off the main thoroughfare, and a surprising variety of establishments: 2 saloons, a dressmaker's shop, a blacksmith, a barber shop, and even a small lending library housed in a corner of the newspaper office. "It's more developed than I expected," Rebecca commented as they turned onto Pine Street. "The railroad changed everything," Wade explained. 2 years ago, this was just a crossroads with a general store and a saloon. Progress comes fast out here when it comes." The schoolhouse was exactly as Mrs. Tanner had described, a simple white clapboard building with a small bell tower, set at the edge of town near a stand of cottonwood trees. A neat yard surrounded it, with a water pump at one side and what appeared to be the beginnings of a garden plot at the other. "It's perfect," Rebecca breathed, taking in what would be her domain. Reverend Porter was tending to the church garden across the street and came over when he spotted them, bringing the schoolhouse keys. "Thought you might stop by today," he said cheerfully. "Come see your new home." The interior of the schoolhouse was a single large room with rows of simple desks facing a teacher's desk on a small raised platform. Bookshelves lined one wall, sparsely filled but sturdy. A blackboard spanned the front wall, and large windows admitted plenty of light. "Through that door is your living quarters." Reverend Porter indicated a door at the rear of the classroom. "Basic but private." The living space consisted of two small rooms, a bedroom barely large enough for a bed and chest of drawers, and a combination kitchen and sitting area with a wood stove, a table with two chairs, and a small sofa. A back door led to a tiny porch overlooking the creek. "The privy's out back," the Reverend explained apologetically. "No indoor plumbing yet, I'm afraid. Water from the pump is clean, though." "It's charming," Rebecca assured him, already envisioning how she would make the space her own. "When may I move in?" "Anytime you're ready." "Mrs. Abernathy's women's group cleaned it thoroughly last week, hoping we'd find a teacher soon." He handed her the keys. "These are yours now. If you need anything, just ask." After the Reverend departed, Rebecca wandered through the rooms again, running her hand along the smooth desktop, testing the chair behind it, examining the few books on the shelves. Wade watched her with a bemused expression. "You really love teaching, don't you?" he observed. "I do," Rebecca confirmed. "There's nothing quite like seeing a child grasp a new concept, watching their mind expand with knowledge." She turned to him curiously. "Did you enjoy school as a boy?" A shadow crossed Wade's face. "Didn't have much schooling. My father was a tenant farmer in Kentucky. Needed my help in the fields from the time I could walk. Learned reading and figures from my mother in the evenings, but that was about it." "Yet you appreciate literature," Rebecca noted, thinking of the Jane Austen novel he had given her. Wade shrugged. "Elizabeth, my wife, she taught me to appreciate many things. She was educated, came from a good Boston family. Shocked everyone by marrying a rough cowboy with dirt under his nails." There was both pride and lingering disbelief in his voice, as if he still couldn't quite fathom why such a woman had chosen him. Rebecca found herself envying the long-dead Elizabeth, who had known Wade in his younger days, who had shared his life and borne his child. "She must have been remarkable," Rebecca said softly. "She was," Wade agreed, a distant look in his eyes. Then he seemed to shake off the memories. "And so are you in a different way. Takes courage to start over in a strange place." Rebecca thought of her father's journal, the scandal that had indirectly led her here. "Sometimes circumstances force our hand, but I'm beginning to think Promise Creek might be exactly where I'm meant to be." Wade's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of connection, of possibility. "I think so too," he said quietly. The moment was interrupted by the sound of horses outside. Wade moved to the window, his posture instantly alert. "Sheriff," he said, his tone changing. "And looks like he's got company." Rebecca joined him at the window to see Sheriff Tanner dismounting in front of the schoolhouse, accompanied by a man in handcuffs, a rough-looking character with a week's growth of beard and a sullen expression. Wade opened the schoolhouse door as the sheriff approached, one hand firmly on his prisoner's arm. "Wade, Miss Nelson," the sheriff greeted them. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know caught one of Harmon's men trying to sell stolen goods in Jefferson City. This is Luke Dawson. He's admitted to being part of the gang that attacked your stagecoach, Miss Nelson." Rebecca felt a chill as she looked at the man who had helped leave her to die. His eyes, when they met hers, held no remorse, only a calculating assessment. "That her?" Dawson asked the sheriff. "Nelson's daughter." "Watch your tone," Wade warned. Stepping slightly in front of Rebecca, Sheriff Tanner gave his prisoner a shake. "Dawson here's turned informant. Says Jed Harmon's planning something big. Thinks you might know where the Blackwater gold is hidden, Miss Nelson." There is no gold, Rebecca said firmly. The mine owner took it all when he disappeared. My father was a victim of the scheme, not a conspirator, Dawson snorted. That's not what Jed says. Says your pa was in on it from the start, helped that snake Blackwood set the whole thing up, then double-crossed him and kept the gold for himself. Rebecca shook her head, though doubt crept in. Her father's journal had revealed his involvement in the investment scheme, but nothing about any gold. My father lost everything when the mine failed. He died in debt. If he'd had gold, don't you think he would have used it? Unless he hid it somewhere only his daughter would know to look, Dawson suggested with a sly grin. Jed's convinced your pa left you some kind of message, a map maybe. That's absurd, Rebecca protested. I inherited nothing but debts and a few personal effects. The sheriff looked troubled. Regardless, Harmon believes it. That makes you a target, Miss Nelson. Dawson says Jed was furious when he heard you'd been rescued. He'll try again. Wade's expression hardened. She'll need protection. Already thought of that, Sheriff Tanner said. Deputy Miller will keep an eye on the boarding house at night. During the day, well, he glanced between Wade and Rebecca meaningfully. I reckon Miss Nelson won't be alone much. I can't live in fear, Rebecca objected. I have a position to start, students to teach. No one's suggesting you hide away, the sheriff assured her, but caution would be wise until we catch Harmon. Wade turned to Rebecca, his face grave. The sheriff's right. Harmon's dangerous, especially when he's fixated on something. Let us help keep you safe. Looking at the determination in Wade's eyes, Rebecca found she couldn't refuse. Very well, but I won't let this threat dictate my life. I've come too far to turn back now. Sheriff Tanner nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Now I need to get this one locked up. Just wanted to warn you both. He tugged Dawson back toward the horses. As they watched the sheriff depart with his prisoner, Wade placed a hand lightly on Rebecca's shoulder. Are you all right? Rebecca squared her shoulders. I'm angry. And a little frightened, she admitted, but mostly determined not to let Jed Harmon rob me of this new beginning. That's the Rebecca Nelson I'm coming to know, Wade said with a hint of admiration. Spirited. Despite the threat hanging over her, Rebecca felt a warm glow at his words. My father used to call me stubborn. Same quality, different perspective, Wade observed with a smile. Now, let's continue our tour of Promise Creek. I'd be a poor guide if I let a little thing like an outlaw threat cut the day short. His attempt to lighten the mood worked, and Rebecca found herself smiling back. Lead on, Mr. Irwin. I believe you mentioned the library. They spent the rest of the morning exploring the town, Wade's protective presence at her side both reassuring and distracting. Rebecca couldn't help noticing how people deferred to him, how the men nodded respectfully, and the women's eyes followed him with interest. Wade Irwin clearly commanded respect in Promise Creek, and not just for his successful ranch. At the newspaper office and lending library, they met the editor, Harold Jenkins, an enthusiastic young man who immediately offered Rebecca access to his collection of educational materials. Been saving these for whenever we got a proper teacher, he explained, showing her several crates of books. Ordered them from Chicago last year. Rebecca was delighted to discover primers, readers, arithmetic texts, and even a set of geography books with maps. This is wonderful, Mr. Jenkins. The children will benefit enormously. Call me Harry, the editor insisted. Everyone does. And I'm hoping you'll consider writing an occasional piece for the Promise Creek Gazette about educational matters. Our readers would appreciate a learned perspective. By midday, Rebecca had met half the town, it seemed, and had received numerous offers of help with the schoolhouse, everything from new curtains to additional desks for the expected influx of students in the fall. The community's enthusiasm for education warmed her heart and confirmed her decision to stay. People here value learning, she commented to Wade as they walked back toward the boarding house for lunch. That's not always the case in frontier towns. Most folks here are building something for the future, Wade explained. They want better for their children than they had themselves. He glanced at her. Like me. The simple statement revealed much about Wade's character, his forward-thinking nature, his desire to improve, his fundamental decency. Rebecca found herself increasingly drawn to him, not just for his heroic rescue or his handsome features, but for the man he revealed himself to be with each conversation. At the boarding house, Mrs. Tanner had prepared a hearty midday meal and insisted Wade join them. Over roast chicken and fresh bread, they discussed Rebecca's plans for the school. "I'll need to take inventory of supplies, develop a curriculum appropriate for different ages, and prepare the classroom," Rebecca said, her mind already organizing tasks. "And I should probably call on the families with school-age children, introduce myself." "I can help with that," Wade offered. "Know most of the families with children. Could introduce you around over the next few days." Rebecca was touched by his continued willingness to assist her. "That would be most helpful, thank you. And when do you plan to move into the schoolhouse quarters?" Mrs. Tanner asked. "Tomorrow, I think," Rebecca decided. "The sooner I settle in, the better prepared I'll be for Monday." Wade frowned slightly. "Might be safer to stay here a bit longer, with what we learned about Harmon's intentions." "The schoolhouse is actually more defensible," Mrs. Tanner pointed out pragmatically. "Single entrance at the front and the back door visible from the creek side. Easier for the sheriff's men to keep an eye on than my place with all its comings and goings." Wade considered this. "You may be right, but I don't like the idea of Miss Nelson being alone out there at night." "I'm not helpless," Rebecca reminded him. "And I refuse to arrange my life around Jed Harmon's threats." A look of respect mixed with exasperation crossed Wade's face. Stubborn indeed. After lunch, Wade reluctantly took his leave, explaining he needed to check on his ranch. "Been away too long already." "My foreman's capable, but there are decisions that need my attention." "Of course," Rebecca said, surprised by her disappointment at his departure. "You've already been extraordinarily generous with your time." "I'll be back tomorrow to help you move to the schoolhouse," Wade promised. "And I've got business in town several days a week. We'll continue those introductions to families." It was a commitment to see her regularly, and Rebecca found herself pleased at the prospect. "I look forward to it." Wade paused at the boarding house door, seeming reluctant to leave despite his stated need to return to his ranch. "Rebecca," he said, his voice low, "be careful. Harmon's not to be underestimated." "I will," she assured him, touched by his concern. After he left, Mrs. Tanner gave Rebecca a knowing look. "That man's sweet on you." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Don't be ridiculous. He feels responsible for me because he rescued me." Mrs. Tanner said skeptically. "And I suppose that's why he can't take his eyes off you when you're not looking. Pure responsibility." Rebecca tried to dismiss the landlady's observations, but a part of her hoped Mrs. Tanner was right. There was no denying her own growing attraction to Wade Irwin. But was it merely gratitude on her part? Admiration for his heroic actions? Or something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds? That evening, as Rebecca packed her belongings in preparation for the move to the schoolhouse, she found herself contemplating the strange turns her life had taken. A week ago, she had been on a stagecoach heading west, her future uncertain but conventional. Now she was preparing to teach in a frontier town, under threat from an outlaw, and increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of a blue-eyed rancher who had pulled her from certain death. Life, it seemed, was full of unexpected rescues. True to his word, Wade arrived early the next morning with a wagon to transport Rebecca's trunk and the few supplies she had purchased for her new home. Mrs. Tanner added a basket of food essentials: flour, sugar, coffee, and preserves as a housewarming gift. "Can't have our teacher going hungry," she insisted when Rebecca protested. The morning was bright and clear, Promise Creek bustling with Saturday activity as Wade drove the wagon slowly down the main street. Rebecca sat beside him on the wagon seat, acutely aware of his proximity and the occasional brush of his arm against hers as he handled the reins. "Nervous?" Wade asked as they approached the schoolhouse. "A little," Rebecca admitted. "It's been a long time since I lived completely on my own. In St. Louis, I boarded with the headmistress of the school. Frontier living takes some getting used to," Wade acknowledged, "but you strike me as adaptable." At the schoolhouse, they found Reverend Porter and several men from the town council waiting to help. "Mr. Grant had brought a rocking chair, my late wife's. Been gathering dust in my attic. while Reverend Porter contributed a braided rug for the sitting room floor. Even Harry Jenkins from the newspaper had stopped by with the promised crates of books. The men carried Rebecca's trunk and the furniture gifts into the small living quarters while Wade unloaded the supplies he had brought: firewood for the stove, a hammer and nails for hanging things, extra lamp oil, and most surprisingly, a Winchester rifle. "Every home here needs protection," he said simply when Rebecca raised her eyebrows at the weapon. "Not just from Harmon. There are wolves, bears, and other dangers." "I've never fired a gun," Rebecca confessed. "I'll teach you," Wade promised. "Basic safety and handling at least." Pray you never need it, but better to be prepared. By mid-morning, Rebecca's new home was taking shape. Her clothes hung in the small wardrobe, her books lined the shelf above the sofa, and Mrs. Tanner's food supplies filled the kitchen cupboard. The men had departed, leaving Wade to show Rebecca how to operate the wood stove and where to find the best water from the creek if the pump froze in winter. "It's cozy," Rebecca said, looking around the simple space with satisfaction. "It feels like home already." Wade watched her with a thoughtful expression. "You adapt well to new circumstances. Most city women would find this primitive." "I'm not most women," Rebecca replied with a smile, "and I've always believed home is what you make it, not where you find yourself." "A wise philosophy," Wade said. He hesitated, then added, "I should warn you my ranch is 10 miles from town. If you need help, it's a fair ride." Rebecca understood his concern. "I'll be careful, Wade, and I have neighbors nearby, the church across the street." "Still," Wade said, his brow furrowed, "I'd feel better if—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "I've arranged with one of my ranch hands, Tom Barker, to stay in town for the next few weeks. He'll keep an eye on the schoolhouse at night. Good man, former cavalry scout, you can trust him." Rebecca was touched by Wade's thoroughness. "Thank you. Though I hope such precautions prove unnecessary." "So do I," Wade said grimly, "but until Harmon's caught, I'm not taking chances with your safety." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver through Rebecca that had nothing to do with fear. Their eyes met and held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Wade took a step closer, close enough that Rebecca could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could detect the scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. For one breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Part of her, a surprisingly large part, hoped he would. Instead, Wade cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should go. Need to introduce you to Tom, show him where he'll be stationed." Rebecca nodded, both relieved and disappointed. "Of course." Outside, Wade whistled sharply, and a young man riding a bay gelding approached from the direction of the church, where he had apparently been waiting. Tom Barker was in his mid-20s, with a serious face and watchful eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Nelson, this is Tom Barker, one of my best men," Wade introduced them. "Tom, Miss Rebecca Nelson, Promise Creek's new teacher." "Madam," Tom touched the brim of his hat respectfully, "Boss says you need some looking after for a spell." "I appreciate your assistance, Mr. Barker," Rebecca said, "though I hope it won't be for long." "No trouble, madam. I like town better than the ranch anyway. More happening." He grinned, revealing a boyish charm beneath his serious demeanor. Wade explained the arrangement. Tom would watch the schoolhouse from dusk till dawn, staying in the stable behind the church, where he could see both the front and back entrances of Rebecca's new home. During the day, he would patrol the town casually, never far from the schoolhouse while Rebecca was there. "Won't be obvious about it," Tom assured her. "Don't want to frighten the little ones or their parents." After giving Tom detailed instructions, Wade turned back to Rebecca. "I need to head back to the ranch now. Cattle drive preparations waiting, but I'll be in town Monday for supplies. We'll stop by the school, see how your first day goes." "I'd like that," Rebecca said, surprised by how much she was already anticipating seeing him again. Wade mounted his horse, then looked down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Rebecca, take care of yourself, promise me." "I promise," she replied solemnly. "Thank you, Wade, for everything." He nodded once, then turned his horse and rode away, Tom falling into step beside him as they headed toward the church stable. Rebecca watched until they disappeared around the corner, then returned to her new home to continue settling in. The weekend passed quickly as Rebecca prepared for her first day of teaching. She visited several families with school-age children, introducing herself and learning about her future students. The parents were uniformly welcoming, clearly relieved to have a qualified teacher for their children. Sunday morning found her in the small church across from the schoolhouse, where Reverend Porter introduced her to the congregation. The simple service, with its hymns sung enthusiastically if not always in tune, and the Reverend's straightforward sermon on community, reminded Rebecca of her childhood church in rural Missouri before her family moved to St. Louis. She scanned the pews several times, wondering if Wade might attend services in town rather than at his ranch, but he wasn't present. Rebecca tried to ignore her disappointment, focusing instead on meeting more townspeople and answering questions about her teaching plans. Sunday evening, she put final touches on her lesson plans and went to bed early, both nervous and excited about the day ahead. From her window, she could see the glow of Tom Barker's cigarette as he maintained his watch near the church stable, a reassuring reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Rebecca dressed carefully in her best teaching dress, a deep blue cotton with white collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a neat bun. After a quick breakfast, she stepped into the classroom and wrote on the blackboard, "Welcome to Promise Creek School, Miss Nelson." At 8 o'clock, she rang the school bell, its clear tone echoing through the morning air. Within minutes, children began arriving, some accompanied by parents, others in groups of siblings, all dressed in their best clothes and carrying lunch pails or cloth-wrapped sandwiches. Rebecca greeted each child at the door, learning names and ages. By 8:30, 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old were seated at the desks, watching her with expressions varying from excitement to apprehension to teenage boredom. "Good morning," Rebecca began, smiling at her new class. "I'm Miss Nelson, and I'm delighted to be your teacher. Before we begin our lessons, I'd like to learn a little about each of you and what you've been studying." The morning passed in a blur of assessments and introductions. Rebecca quickly discovered that the students' educational levels varied widely. Some of the older children read quite well but struggled with mathematics, while others showed the opposite pattern. The youngest had received little formal instruction, but were eager to learn. By noon, when she dismissed the children for their lunch break, Rebecca had developed a clearer picture of the challenges ahead. She would need to group students by ability rather than age for many subjects, develop independent study projects for the advanced students, and find ways to keep everyone engaged despite their different levels. It was exactly the kind of teaching challenge she loved. The afternoon session focused on establishing classroom routines and beginning basic lessons in reading and arithmetic. Rebecca was pleased with the students' behavior and enthusiasm. Even the oldest boys, who she had worried might resent a female teacher, participated respectfully. At 3 o'clock, she dismissed the class with their first homework assignments, simple readings or arithmetic problems appropriate to each student's level. As the children filed out, several parents waited outside to ask about the day and thank her for taking on the position. Rebecca was explaining her assessment process to Mrs. Cooper when she spotted a familiar figure on horseback approaching the schoolhouse. Her heart gave a little jump as Wade dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post. "Mr. Irwin," Mrs. Cooper greeted him with a smile. "Come to check on our new teacher. Just passing through town," Wade said casually, though his eyes were on Rebecca. "Thought I'd see how the first day went." "Wonderfully," Rebecca told him, aware of a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "The children are bright and eager to learn. Miss Nelson is already organizing a proper library for the school," Mrs. Cooper added enthusiastically. "Says every child should have access to books, even in a frontier town." "A worthy goal," Wade agreed. He waited patiently while Rebecca finished her conversation with Mrs. Cooper and the last parents departed with their children. When they were alone, Wade's formal demeanor relaxed. "You look happy," he observed. "Teaching agrees with you." "It does," Rebecca confirmed, leading the way into the schoolhouse where she began straightening desks and gathering papers. though I've already identified several needs: more advanced books for the older students, a proper globe, and slate boards for the youngest who are just learning to form letters. Wade leaned against a desk, watching her work. Make a list. I'm heading to Denver next month on ranch business. Could look for those items. Rebecca paused in her tidying. That's very kind, but I can order through the mercantile. Take twice as long and cost more, Wade pointed out practically. Besides, I need an excuse to buy books that doesn't make my cowboys think I'm getting soft. The image of Wade secretly reading literature while maintaining his rugged rancher persona made Rebecca laugh. Heaven forbid anyone discover you're both brave and educated. A smile tugged at Wade's mouth. A man has his reputation to consider. As Rebecca continued organizing the classroom, Wade moved to help, stacking books and carrying the water bucket outside to refill it from the pump. They worked together companionably, and Rebecca found herself enjoying his quiet presence and practical assistance. Any sign of trouble? Wade asked finally, his tone more serious. Rebecca shook her head. None. Tom has been keeping watch as promised, but there's been nothing suspicious. Good, Wade said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. Harmon's not one to give up easily, but maybe Dawson's arrest has made him cautious. Or perhaps he's realized I truly know nothing about any gold, Rebecca suggested hopefully. Wade's expression remained troubled. Perhaps. He glanced out the window, checking the position of the sun. I should head back to the ranch before dark. Just wanted to make sure you were settling in all right. I am, Rebecca assured him. Though I admit, it's nice to see a friendly face at the end of the school day. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, a warmth that made her breath catch. I'll be in town again on Thursday for a meeting with the cattle buyers. May I call on you then? I'd like that, Rebecca said, pleased by the prospect. Perhaps you could stay for dinner. I'm not an accomplished cook, but I can manage a simple meal. I'd be honored, Wade accepted, then added with a hint of teasing, fair warning, after months of chuck wagon fare, my standards are embarrassingly low. Rebecca laughed. I'll try not to disappoint nonetheless. Outside, as Wade prepared to mount his horse, he hesitated. Rebecca, He seemed to struggle with his words. I'm glad you've found your place here. The simple statement held more meaning than its surface suggested. Rebecca stepped closer, impulsively placing her hand on his arm. Thanks to you, Wade, I wouldn't be here at all if not for you. His gaze dropped to her hand, then lifted to her face. For a suspended moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, standing in the late afternoon sunlight. Then Wade covered her hand with his own, giving it a gentle squeeze before releasing it. Until Thursday, he said softly, mounting his horse. Rebecca watched him ride away, her hand still warm from his touch, wondering if he felt the same growing connection that she did, this pull between them that seemed to strengthen with each meeting. The next few days fell into a pleasant routine. Rebecca found her stride as a teacher, adjusting lessons to meet the varied needs of her students and gradually establishing order in the classroom. The children responded well to her combination of firm expectations and genuine interest in their progress. In the evenings, she prepared lessons, graded assignments, and continued organizing the schoolhouse. Tom Barker maintained his watchful presence, though he was discreet enough that Rebecca sometimes forgot he was there, until she glimpsed him making his rounds or caught the glow of his cigarette after dark. By Thursday, Rebecca was looking forward to Wade's visit with an anticipation that both excited and unsettled her. She dismissed her class promptly at 3, then hurried to prepare for dinner. She had purchased fresh bread from the baker's wife, vegetables from a farmer's market stall, and a small roast from the butcher. Her cooking skills were basic but adequate, learned during her years of boarding with the headmistress in St. Louis. At 5 o'clock, she had the table set, the roast in the oven, and vegetables simmering on the stove. She had changed from her teaching dress into a sage green gown with a lace collar, one of her nicer dresses, though she told herself it was simply appropriate for receiving a guest, not a special effort for Wade in particular. The knock at her door came precisely at 6. Rebecca smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and opened the door to find Wade standing on her small porch, hat in hand. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance as well. His hair was freshly trimmed, his shirt crisp, and he wore a black string tie at his collar. "Good evening," he greeted her, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. "You look lovely." Rebecca felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, please come in." Wade stepped into her small living quarters, filling the space with his presence. In his hands was a package wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something," he said, offering it to her. Rebecca unwrapped the gift to find a leather-bound copy of North American geography with detailed maps and illustrations. "Wade, this is wonderful. Where did you find it?" "Had it at the ranch," he explained. "Part of Elizabeth's collection. Thought it might be useful for your classes until you can get a proper globe." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Rebecca deeply. "It's perfect, thank you." They sat down to dinner, the small table making for an intimate setting. Rebecca had worried the conversation might be awkward, but they fell into easy discussion about the school, the town, and Wade's cattle operation. He explained the upcoming cattle drive to the railroad junction 50 miles away, where his steers would be shipped east to Chicago's stockyards. "It's a busy time," he acknowledged. 2 weeks of hard riding and long days. "But the income from this drive will see the ranch through the winter and allow for expansion in the spring." "You've built something impressive," Rebecca commented. "From what people say, the Flying W is one of the most successful ranches in the territory." Wade accepted the compliment with a modest nod. "Been fortunate, had good years, made some smart decisions, but ranching's always a gamble. Drought, disease, falling prices can wipe out years of work." "Yet you persist," Rebecca observed, "because you love it." "Because it's what I know," Wade replied, then considered further. "But yes, I suppose I do love it, the work, the land, the freedom of it." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? Has teaching always been your passion?" Rebecca smiled, remembering. "Since I was 8 years old, lining up my dolls and giving them lessons. My father wanted me to marry well, have a comfortable life in society, but I was determined to have a profession. Teaching was one of the few respectable options for a woman." "You'd have excelled at whatever you chose," Wade said with conviction. "You have a sharp mind and a determined spirit." "Why, Mr. Irwin, that almost sounds like a compliment," Rebecca teased, pleased by his assessment. "Merely an observation," Wade returned with a hint of a smile. "Though I admit, I've made quite a few observations about you since pulling you off that bridge." The reference to their first meeting shifted the mood, reminding them both of the circumstances that had brought them together. Rebecca set down her fork, suddenly serious. "Wade, I've never properly thanked you for saving my life that day. It was extraordinarily brave, what you did." Wade shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "Not anyone would have climbed down that bridge with no thought for their own safety. You risked your life for a stranger. That's rare and remarkable." Wade looked uncomfortable with her praise. "I saw someone in trouble and helped. Simple as that." "Nothing simple about it," Rebecca insisted. "You're a good man, Wade Irwin." Their eyes met across the table, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Wade's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, and Rebecca felt her heartbeat quicken in response. The moment was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Wade immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively to his side where Rebecca knew he carried a revolver beneath his vest. "Miss Nelson," Tom Barker's voice called. "Sorry to disturb you, but there's something you should know." Wade rose and opened the door. Tom stood on the porch, looking apologetic but concerned. "Evening, boss. Sheriff sent me to warn you both. Jed Harmon was spotted near Elkhorn Crossing this morning, about 15 miles east, had 3 men with him." Wade's expression darkened. "Heading this way, looks like it," Tom confirmed. "Sheriffs organized extra patrols around town, especially near the school here." Rebecca joined them at the door. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Barker." Tom nodded respectfully. "Just doing my job, madam. I'll be keeping extra close watch tonight." He touched his hat and retreated to his post near the church. Wade closed the door, his earlier relaxed manner replaced by alertness. "I should stay in town tonight," he said decisively. "Can get a room at the hotel. Is that necessary?" Rebecca asked, though she was touched by his protective instinct. "Tom seems quite capable, and the sheriff has increased patrols." Harmon's not to be underestimated, Wade said grimly. He's cunning and holds grudges. If he's coming to Promise Creek, it's with purpose. Rebecca sighed, reluctant to have their evening cut short by threats. At least finish dinner before you go running off to the hotel. The danger isn't immediate from the sound of it. Wade hesitated, then nodded. You're right. No sense letting good food go to waste. He returned to the table, though his relaxed demeanor was gone, replaced by a vigilance that reminded Rebecca of their precarious situation. They finished the meal with more subdued conversation, the specter of Jed Harmon hanging over them. Afterward, as Rebecca cleared the dishes, Wade moved to the window, scanning the darkening street with practiced eyes. I'll walk you to the hotel, Rebecca offered when the kitchen was tidy. I could use some fresh air. Wade looked about to object, then reconsidered. All right. But we'll stay on the main street, well-lit areas only. The evening was mild, with a crescent moon rising over the eastern hills. Promise Creek was quiet at this hour, though light and piano music spilled from the saloon down the street, and a few residents were still about their business. As they walked, Wade kept Rebecca on the inside of the boardwalk, his body between her and the street. His vigilance was both comforting and a stark reminder of the danger that might be approaching. I won't let Harmon get anywhere near you, Wade said suddenly, his voice low but intense. I promise you that, Rebecca. She glanced up at him, moved by his determination. I believe you, but I worry about you putting yourself in danger on my account. I can handle Jed Harmon, Wade said with quiet confidence. They reached the hotel, a two-story building with a small lobby lit by oil lamps. Mrs. Abernathy greeted them from behind the front desk, her shrewd eyes taking in their arrival together with interest. Evening, Mr. Irwin, Miss Nelson. Need a room for the night, Wade. If you have one available, Wade confirmed. Room 4, top of the stairs, Mrs. Abernathy said, handing him a key. Best view of the street, she winked at Rebecca, and the schoolhouse. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks at the woman's implication, but Wade merely thanked her and paid for the room. In the small lobby, he turned to Rebecca. Thank you for dinner, he said formally, aware of Mrs. Abernathy's attentive presence. It was most enjoyable. You're welcome, Rebecca replied, equally proper. Thank you for the geography book. My students will benefit greatly from it. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Wade said quietly, I'll see you safely home. That's hardly necessary, Rebecca protested. It's just down the street, and Tom is watching the schoolhouse. Humor me, Wade insisted. Rebecca couldn't find it in her heart to refuse, not when his concern was so evident. They walked back to the schoolhouse in comfortable silence, their shoulders occasionally brushing in a way that sent small shivers through Rebecca. At her door, Wade paused. Lock this behind you, and the windows too. I will, Rebecca promised. Try not to worry too much, Wade. Promise Creek seems very safe, even with potential threats. I'll worry less when Harmon's behind bars, Wade said bluntly, then his expression softened. Good night, Rebecca, sleep well. Good night, she replied, suddenly reluctant to go inside to end their evening together. For a heartbeat, they stood facing each other in the soft moonlight. Then Wade lifted his hand to her face, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair back from her cheek. The touch was brief but tender, sending a flood of warmth through Rebecca. Wade, she whispered, not even sure what she wanted to say. His eyes held hers, dark with emotions she couldn't fully read but recognized in her own heart. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her with a sudden intensity that was both thrilling and frightening. Instead, Wade stepped back, breaking the spell. Lock your door, he reminded her gently. Rebecca nodded, unable to trust her voice. She stepped inside and secured the door as promised, hearing Wade's footsteps retreat toward the street. Through the window, she watched his tall figure move back toward the hotel, disappearing into the shadows between pools of lamplight. Sleep was elusive that night, her mind filled with thoughts of Wade Irwin and the growing feelings she could no longer deny. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confused mix of dangling above rushing waters, strong arms lifting her to safety, and blue eyes that seemed to see into her very soul.